the talent, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you today?
I'm fine and dandy. I'm glad I'm finally getting my props, so I won't have to go back to my trailer just yet. 107
Don't worry,
episodes.
the green M&Ms are coming, sir. The green M&Ms are coming.
Get shot glass, or
Yes.
else I walk. It's 107 episodes. It's quite remarkable. We weren't shut down after about 5.
Well, I was going to say 5 minutes into the first episode, but hey.
Well, I mean, gosh, it certainly seems I have a higher opinion of us than you, which is difficult to understand. But 107 is, and considering that there were probably, I don't know, 60 or 70 episodes of a G&T podcast before that.
We're getting old hat at this now.
And we still haven't got any better. So, you know.
I was going to say our quality has maintained, just to keep it a myth, so like, they've improved, obviously.
We have headphones now.
It has never dropped, I can tell you that.
We've never been better than this.
Yes, that's a guarantee.
rock solid, ironclad guarantee. If you're somebody who's been listening to us since the old G&T days, if you're one of our bots on the internet, thank you. Even if you're not, if this is the first time you've ever downloaded the show, I don't know how you found us, but welcome, and we're glad to have you aboard. And we have, I think, we were just discussing it before we went live, a second week we have a very full show.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had the Zack Snyder Justice League marathon, which ended up didn't talk about much, but we went quite deep into it, and I think we're going to have a similar thing today. So for a little bit of let's do the pre-run. So for anyone who's listening to this on podcast, you can check us out live on Wednesdays, usually about 7:30, depending on traffic for me. Usually.
Australian Eastern Time if you're from somewhere else.
That is very, very true. Thank you, Travis. But we are live on twitch.tv/The Fried Brain, youtube.com/Armchair Producers, facebook.com/Fried Brain Productions. And we've also got Travis as well on there, facebook.com/Travis Croft, I think it is. But we'd love you to come along, like, subscribe, share. It helps us get new people joining in. We're very active in our chat as well. So if you've got thoughts and suggestions, like last week, someone was talking about Flight of Dragons. Travis might have an opportunity to talk about it.
I watched the damn thing.
Yeah. And for anyone who has Amazon Prime account, you can also you get a 1 month free Twitch Prime subscription, which you can use. That gives us a little bit of cachet with Twitch, and you get to just kind of show your support, and that's free every month. You just have to re-up it. So we'd appreciate it, or find another creator. And if you've got Amazon Prime, it's just sitting there.
There's some really good people who do some really entertaining stuff on Twitch.
Yeah.
And we're not amongst them. So, but that said, if you enjoy it, that's fantastic. And, do what you will. But there are some really great creators out there. And I have a new television. And one of the worst things about it is it's a smart TV. And it doesn't have a Twitch app.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's got all the other apps for all the other things, right? You could ever possibly imagine, but it doesn't have a Twitch app. So I find myself watching a lot less Twitch now because I guess I've just adapted to have my TV having all the things that I wanted.
Does your TV have like my TV? It's got I think they call it like anytime viewing or something, and you can kind of sync it up, just cast straight to the TV.
I could do it from my phone, so it's not impossible by any stretch of imagination. I just find that a little bit more trouble.
Yeah. It's just like, cannot connect right now. So
it's like it's a bit fussy. It's fussy about when it wants to connect to the telly, so it's just easy with an app. But absolute first world problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, we're discussing it. My TV doesn't have a Twitch app. We got a full show. We got a packed lineup. We've actually watched 3 things that we've actually both watched, which is a little unusual for us. So should we
2.5.
2.5.
2.5.
Okay, there you go. So,
but the basic rundown for the show, ladies and gentlemen, we will be doing our chain movie at the top of the show, as we always do, which is connecting from the previous week to the new week via actors, writers, directors, producers, musicians. There's always a connective tissue. Last week, we talked about Night of the Generals, which had a chilling performance by Peter O'Toole. I decided it was my turn. We interchange. I followed Peter O'Toole to the Stephen Fry early 2000s movie Bright Young Things. So that's going to be our first topic. Next up, we'll be talking about the first 2 episodes of Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney+. Then we will talk about Godzilla versus Kong. Seeing how long we go in the teeth, we may have a chance to talk a little bit about Flight of Dragons and Netflix's new show, The Irregulars. So let's get straight into the chain movie, shall we? Bright Young Things.
So, as you mentioned earlier, it's the connected film from last week, the chain movie. I think the connection was Peter O'Toole.
Mm-hmm.
The great Peter O'Toole. He played the killer in The Nova Generals. He plays someone's dad in this film. And I think it's accurate to say someone's dad because we go. Emily Mortimer's character, Nina's dad.
Yes.
And I don't actually recall, was it the Colonel or something very original like that?
Yeah. I can't remember any of the characters' names.
And that again says quite a great deal about this film. Here's the interesting thing. I didn't like this film very much. I found it quite dull. But I suspect that might be a rather generous synopsis of a film compared to what you're about to do to it. But should we give it a bit of a?
Let's tell the audience what it's about.
So I'll go for a slightly longer version because otherwise this is not going to go very long. A Fool and His Money. In the 1930s, Adam Fenwick Symes, played by Stephen Campbell Moore, is part of the English idol class. Wanting to marry the flighty Nina Blunt, played by Emily Mortimer, he's a novelist with £100 advance for a manuscript confiscated by English customs. He spends the next several years trying to get money and to set a wedding date. He trades in gossip, wins money on wages, then gives it to a drunken major, played by Jim Broadbent, who suggested he bet on a horse in an upcoming race. Adam tries to get the money back, but can't find the major. Meanwhile, Nina needs security, friends drink too much, and general unhappiness spoils the party. Then war breaks out. Is Adam's bright youth dimming with the fall of an empire? So this is based on a novel by Evelyn Waugh, Vile Bodies. We learned last week Evelyn Waugh is a dude, which is actually how much I know about classic British literature. Probably everyone's like, "Oh, do you mean? Of course he is a dude." And I'm like, "I mean Evelyn Waugh books." As you said, mentioned, it's directed by Stephen Fry, and of course, it's directed by Stephen Fry. The film reeks of Stephen Fry. Quite an impressive cast. We mentioned what's the guy's name?
Peter O'Toole.
Peter O'Toole. Sorry, I was just trying to think of his protagonist's name. So Adam. Played by Stephen Campbell Moore, he's got the starring role in this picture with some very famous people. And I looked at his synopsis, his film history. I'm like, I think I saw him in War of the Worlds last year, but that's about it. We have James McAvoy as Emily Mortimer, probably best known for some of her stuff on American television. Michael Sheen, Stockard Channing, Dan Aykroyd, Jim Broadbent, David Tennant, Peter O'Toole, John Mills is in there, the great Sir John Mills. Again, in a fairly small role. So quite a collection of talent here, and it is individually completely pissed against the wall here. This is a dull film.
Yeah. I remember when this movie came out. This was in the peak. This was 2003, and this was at a point in my life where I just moved to London, and I just got one of the best inventions of all time, the membership card for UGC cinemas, where you paid £15 a month and you could go as often as you wanted. Fan-fucking-tastic. That first year, I watched 365 different movies at the cinema, ladies and gentlemen.
Quite impressive.
That is really impressive. And I kept the
Loser. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's strange. A lot of people have that reaction. It's weird. Fuck you.
Was it a conscious effort to see unique films, or did you like, no, I have to get it up?
It was a great opportunity to just because it was where the cinema was, it got a lot of foreign movies coming in from India, from France, all over Europe. We got a lot of Asian movies coming in, so there was just so much depth. They were every couple of weeks they were having these different kind of themed festivals and stuff. I worked there for a little while, and I was able to do some like 80s themes as well. So it was just a really good eclectic cinema. It got all the big releases. It was a brand spanking new, like what you get when you go into a Readings or a Village cinema, but it just so happened to have a bit more individuality that it kept on doing all these other bits. So it's great cinema, really enjoyable. And you're paying £15 a month. It's like, hell yeah, that's a good night out. Cool.
Yeah. And so I imagine this is where you encountered this film.
It is, yes. And I have such strong memories of coming out of this movie thinking, that was awesome. That's why I chose it for this. And I rented it on Apple TV Plus. I started watching it. And within about 3 minutes, I was looking at my watch going, oh, fuck. Oh, geez. I couldn't get past 26 minutes watching this movie because my fucking God, these characters are horrible. They are just foulness. And thinking about it today, there's a lot of similarities in the period of this movie to another Stephen Fry project, which was Jeeves and Wooster. Did you ever get Jeeves and Wooster over here, Trav?
Yeah. You might be surprised to hear this, but I wasn't alive in the 1940s.
It's not actually. It was a TV show with Stephen Fry. Don't be pedantic.
Was it?
Yeah. It was him and Hugh Laurie, and this was before Hugh Laurie went off to America and did House and all of that stuff. It was based on P.G. Wodehouse novels.
I've heard of P.G. Wodehouse novels. That's why I was assuming you were talking about Jeeves and Wooster. I've heard of Fry and Laurie. But I don't think I've heard of that show.
Yeah. So this was kind of Fry and Laurie. They got really big with their comedy skit show, A Bit of Fry and Laurie. One of the first British shows to use the word cunt on TV. They were merging it in. It was a name of some author of a cricket book, Ted Cunterblast. Yeah.
Quality material right there.
They did some fantastic stuff. But they then went on to do this. It was a bit more serious. It was this very much this time period, same as Bright Young Things. Hugh Laurie plays this really dumb but charming and so friendly aristocratic gent, and Stephen Fry plays his very intellectual, very way above his status butler, and it's just hijinks ensue, and it's really charming and just a delight. It's joyful, whereas this, all of the characters are fucking assholes. And
it's very British, isn't it? Kind of reminded me of something like Mansfield Park.
Yeah,
except I really like Mansfield Park a lot.
Yeah.
And that's actually fun and entertaining. And the fact that they're these upper class assholes, it's like they're played for laughs.
Yeah.
Whereas here they're played with very straight bat.
Yeah.
It's almost like, look how much fun they were, right? What a wonderful time it was to be part of the idle rich. Gallivanting around London, drinking and doing drugs and just being rich and parties. And there's that sort of an angle, and there's so many parties to go to, and but they never actually sort of stop and actually take a closer look at that and go, what a bunch of assholes these people were compared to what life must have been like for the average British person.
Yeah, because that period of time is fascinating. It's wonderful. Like in the beginning, we talked about it through the synopsis. What's his name? Adam's novel, his manuscript called Bright Young Things, gets confiscated because they are stopping certain books coming in, and that feels actually rather poignant to the way that a lot of people have kind of dealt with Brexit and things like that. So like, oh, keep Britain British and all that bollocks. Never mind, we've been invaded more than anyone.
I got into an argument on Saturday night with someone about Brexit. It went for probably over an hour. I actually met somebody who, a friend of mine, who actually voted yes for Brexit. And had a very, very firm opinion. It's just on the side. I thought it was a very interesting thing to actually. The first time I've ever met anybody who actually said yes to Brexit, I'm like, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No. That's fine. This person is dead to me, whoever they are. It's your fault. But yeah, so that kind of censorship was a legitimate thing at that period, and it's kind of rearing its ugly head a little bit now with a lot of the bills that are trying to be pushed through Parliament. So that's an interesting thing that you could make a really interesting story about, just about the society and culture of that time. Similarly, it was between wars, and that is always going to be an interesting point. It's that kind of rediscovering what normal life is, but this looming threat. And there's the great scene with Nigel Planner as the one-armed taxi driver. It takes Adam to go and see the Colonel, and he just says, "Oh, they need to go and see a good bloody war." It's like that was what a lot of people were kind of saying. It's like, oh, these young people idle doing all sorts of stuff. They just need to see some horror. They just set them right.
Trust me, that's not an attitude that's being restricted to the UK. I've heard it said in this country as well.
Yeah, but it's so like there's so many. It's such a ripe period of time, and there's just little hints of it throughout that sort of like, oh, that would be really cool. But the characters are just fucking assholes,
and the story doesn't really do anything. No. What is the actual arc of his story? He arrives in Britain. He wants to marry his girlfriend. He gets his book confiscated and spends the next few years trying to make money, trying and failing to make enough money to convince his girlfriend to marry him. And then he joins the army. I mean, that's literally the story. Like, there's not really a great deal of character development. There's no real arc for the characters, and they go through, a trial and they learn something, and yada yada yada. Stuff just happens.
I feel like there's a lot of the banter between them. There's elements of that funny kind of Oscar Wildean kind of that kind of vibe, which I feel like Stephen Fry is kind of synonymous with. He's very, very open. I mean, he's played Oscar Wilde on screen, and he is very much a big lover, a big fan of Oscar Wilde. And there's elements of the snappy dialogue between them that if you actually study it and you know it, you can kind of go, oh, okay, that's smart humor. But otherwise, it goes by so quickly, and it's not really kind of given its time to shine, that it just passes off as, well, they're just being dicks to each other. But it's not endearing or anything like that. Like, you think about the sardonic way that characters treat each other in Futurama, Family Guy, any of these kind of sitcoms and things like that, where they'll just have this back and forth repartee spats. That's the modern version of what Oscar Wilde was kind of writing, but it's highlighted, and it's always highlighted in Oscar Wilde. And here it's just muddled in amongst this kind of very cavalier, throw it at the wall, see what sticks, move on kind of attitude. And it's just infuriating.
Some of our talent we mentioned earlier is severely wasted. Mm-hmm. James McAvoy, in fairness, James McAvoy was quite young and was certainly not the star he's gone on to become in 2003. It's probably one of his earlier films, I would imagine. But he's in it very briefly before a very abrupt exit from the film in a kind of it treats suicide in a very cavalier manner.
Yeah.
Which I found, I'm not sure I'd say troubling. I'd just say a little bit of, how do you play a suicide for laughs? I guess it's done. But it was, I don't know, it was a little odd. It was a little odd, and it seemed unmotivated and strange to me that happened. Sort of without actually knowing this character at all. And I guess also because we now recognize that James McAvoy's a big star, and having him knock himself off after 20 minutes of screen time, a little unusual.
That's a very, very good example of the cavalier attitude of every cause and effect within the movie. It's like, oh, that happened, but move on.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and so why do we as an audience feel like we should be invested in these characters and just go along on this journey when nothing matters and we're very clearly being told, yeah, you don't need to worry, just enjoy the pretty Gatsby-esque kind of thing. It's like, okay.
I didn't. Was it supposed to be funny, do you think? Because it does say comedy drama on IMDb, and I didn't laugh once. I didn't find anything in this film remotely funny.
There's it's a very Stephen Fry kind of tag of that intellectual comedy, and like some of the banter between characters, it's sort of like, okay, I get why that's funny socially, but it's not actually funny. It's if you've studied Oscar Wilde and if you've studied some of those classic English authors of even stuff like Jane Austen, where she's actually putting a lot of comedy into those social interactions in her books. If you have studied it, if you are quite well versed in it, even more, just a bit more than a cursory experience, you're gonna kind of find it funny, but at the same time, it's still sort of like, yeah.
I like dry comedy. I like Stephen Fry's work on television. But you're right. It just kind of seems to be a very niche comedy in a sense.
Yes.
Like, if you enjoy this kind of British hoity-toity literary style comedy, then you might get something out of this. It's got a pretty good rating on IMDb. It's been reached 6.6. It's got a 64 on Metacritic. And I mean, I found myself, I didn't hate it as much as you did. I was able to finish it. I was quite bored. I found so many of their characters super annoying. The character of Agatha, played by Fenella Woolgar, who's a face that was very, very familiar. I just can't quite pick where I've seen her before. But the character of Agatha, who maybe she's based on Agatha Christie, I don't know. But she was one of the idle rich, one of Adam's and Nina's friends, and just sort of sort of waltzes through life with their heads in the cloud and ends up in a mental home at the end of the year. Just be like, I know spoilers, but right, trust me, I'm doing you a favor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so what are they actually saying here? Is she actually crazy, or is she actually mentally ill, or insane?
Again, it's where this movie kind of has one of its many issues of it's trying to be too many things. It's trying to be very intelligent. It's trying to take a point of view of the society. Like, she is a problem child, and being put into a mental institution was quite common for women who didn't want to fall in line or do what society was expecting of them. And so it is actually a tragic end. And if you do know that, that's what happened, and it's not because she was crazy, it's just because she was a free spirit, the injustice of that is really quite tragic, because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of women through this period were just institutionalized just because they didn't fit in. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with them. It was because they were difficult, and parents with a bit of money just put them over there and kind of forgot about them, which is tragic, much like James McAvoy's suicide. But it's still kind of left so whimsical and unaffirming that you just kind of go, all right, so that happened.
Sorry, I was on mute. Also, we don't care about her character. What we've seen her do is gallivanting around parties, being drunk and taking drugs. Like, we haven't learned anything about her or enough about her to care about her. We haven't spent enough time with her. So, all that stuff you just talked about, and now that you mention it, you're like, okay, I can see that. But we weren't given any of that context in the film.
No.
And we weren't given a character that we cared about to be in that situation. So it was just like, okay, they're having a party now in her ward at the insane asylum because that's what they do. And it comes back to your original point. These people are repellent.
Yeah.
And you make a film about a bunch of repellent people who aren't necessarily doing anything that bad. They're just, living out their 20s doing nothing, which is, fuck knows. That's what I did. But, with a little bit more style, with 2-minute noodles is what I had. And Goon.
You classy motherfucker.
Goon and 2-minute noodles. That would be an Australian version of... I would like to see an Australian version of Bright Young Things, just called Goon. Goon Young Things or something like that. It writes
Bright Young Goons.
Bazza wants to marry Shazza, but he fucking got his fucking Semlink fucking cut off, didn't he?
Stupid cunt.
Fucking got the FJ towed on the weekend and all. It would write itself, I swear to God. But, they're not necessarily bad people doing bad things. They're just seriously unlikable people. I think I met, actually at a party once, I remember, speaking of my 20s, I met somebody who was particularly well off and he'd like to flex about it, as we would say today. Mm-hmm. And she would fit right in with this crowd if she was a little more British. And he was completely unlikable, and you're like, what a prick. And most you can say about most of these people, they don't look like they'd be fun to hang out with unless you're one of them.
Yeah.
So
even then, to hang around with them, there's not much real. Certainly, that it never came across to me as much of a camaraderie between them. They all don't seem to really care about anyone else. It's just like, I'm hanging around with these people because these people are who the cool people hang around with. I don't actually care what happens to them as long as I'm having fun.
Yeah, that'd be about right. There's not a lot of love lost between them, and especially their relationship between Adam and Nina. I mean, it's portrayed in quite a is it supposed to be romantic? Like, she at one point just basically says, "You've got," essentially, I'm paraphrasing, "You've got no money. I'm marrying somebody else. I'm marrying David Tennant." And let's face it, it's David Tennant. Mm-hmm. Who can blame her? Mm-hmm. The guy's a smoke show. Mm-hmm. But he eventually gets her back. So he initially sells her his interest, as he puts it, in Nina, and to David Tennant's character for £100, essentially, or a little bit less.
Yeah.
£76 or something. He sells his interest in his former fiancée. Then he goes to war and comes back and buys his interest back in Nina and her now son for significantly $34,000. Hell of an investment by David Tennant. He should write a book. The Barefoot Doctor or something. Because that's a hell of a return in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And she's totally cool with it. She's like, "Oh, I assume I'm being bought again." You're like, "Well, make me a martini or something." I don't know. And it's like, what the fuck?
And I think it's those things are supposed to be played for laughs. Like in the first opening 20 minutes, it's like, "I'm afraid I don't think I can marry you. I don't have any money." And then it's like, "Oh, wedding's back on. I won £100." And then it's like, "Oh, I lost it again. Marriage is off." It's like, okay. I get why that would be funny or should be funny, but it's just not. It just comes off as these guys are ridiculously privileged and annoying. And
I think maybe a more talented director could have done a lot better of this. And there's a reason Stephen Fry isn't well known as a director. He's a writer, an actor, a voice actor. Mm-hmm. An author, I guess.
This is his only directing credit.
So I think enough said. I mean, some people, as I said, if you look at something again like Mansfield Park, that's a film that I really enjoyed. I can't remember, Michael Apted, was it, who directed that? I can't remember. It was a much more experienced and well-known director in that case than they were talking.
Mansfield Park is Patricia Rozema.
That's not the film I'm thinking of. It's the one with Stephen Fry in it. That he's got the murder.
You're thinking of Gosford Park, I think.
Gosford Park. There's so many parks in England.
Yes, I know.
Gosford Park is the one I'm thinking of. Excuse me for getting my parks mixed up. And
that's Robert Altman.
Robert Altman, who is a legend.
He was a master, and that was kind of him really at the top of his game. And I mean, usually when you got Maggie Smith in, it's going to be pretty fucking good as well.
She doesn't do hot shit, but I think it's needless to say here that we went back to Death Machine territory here with Brian.
Yeah.
This might be the first one you haven't finished.
Yeah, I think it actually is. And so we said off air, I said to Travis that there should be some form of punishment for me not finishing, especially a movie that I picked. So Travis, you have got free reign. What is my punishment?
The punishment is I record another podcast known as The Throwback, available now wherever good podcasts can be attained from, with my good friend Susie, where we watch movies from our childhood and our teen years, and we hold them up to the light of 2021 and go, do they hold up to being an adult? And he knows what's coming, or he may think he knows what's coming. So last night we watched one of Susie's favorite movies from when she was a teenager.
Oh no!
And it was, keep an eye. If you like a good podcast, you might have a look at The Throwback. You can find it on Spotify and all those sort of places. Next one, we haven't recorded the show yet, but I can tell you it was a very uncomfortable viewing experience. Watching Poison Ivy, it was like. This is a film that absolutely does not hold up as a hint for anybody who watches that show. But would I be so cruel as to now make George endure Poison Ivy? I think not.
You're going to take me somewhere else, aren't you?
Poison Ivy 2!
Oh, fuck you.
Where we've gone from the acting chops.
Oh no, there's also a Poison Ivy 3 and 4.
4, which is quite remarkable. But this one has Alyssa Milano in it.
Okay, yep. Xander Berkeley, those are 2. Oh, Camilla Bell, 3 people I know in it.
Okay. I think it's going to file it under American Psycho 2. If somebody bought the rights to the name, and no one's really quite sure why they made it.
Yeah.
Has a 4.5, so it's not quite that bad.
Here's the plot for anyone who's remotely interested in playing along at home. First time out of Michigan, Lily starts art school in LA and shares a house with other young artistic people. Both her teacher and roomie/classmate show interest in her. This sounds like the prime material for what would have been. I've talked about it quite a lot in these kinds of scenarios. When Channel 5 first aired in BBC, that mildly soft porn with a story attempt, probably actually a student project that somehow got a little bit more funding. Yep, all right. This is going to be my punishment. Poison Ivy.
And
2.
just for a treat, we've got an old friend visiting.
Any thoughts on what was happening in the Polish poster for Everton?
As the only person with the band hammer, you're just gonna have to watch that because I can't do it. Behave yourself, Fox Pixar. We know your game, and as much as we like it, let's keep it above the belt. That's George's punishment. We don't do punishment very often anymore. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But I found myself going, wow, if I think the actual original Poison Ivy was about a 5 or 5.5, I think, on IMDb. If this is a 4.5, how bad does it have to be?
Yeah, that's fair. But we do also have to find out, where are you taking us for next week's Chain movie, Travis?
I actually prepared for this one for a change. I know, right? Shocking. What you can actually achieve instead of me just going, it's my turn to pick.
Ghostbusters!
Quickly. I could with Dan Aykroyd. I will not, though, because that's an obvious choice. And I don't like the obvious picks. I'm trying to add some culture and some life to the show, and we're going back to the early 80s.
Okay.
Not the 60s, then go back to the early 80s, and we are going to follow Jim Broadbent 2. Yes, where is it here? Time Bandits.
my goodness.
1981.
Yeah.
Terry Gilliam, very loose sort of Monty Python reunion kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. But this, and talk about another great place to launch off of. Sean Connery, Shelley Duvall, John Cleese, Ian Holm, Michael Palin, Peter Vaughan, got David Warner. I could take you to Tron, Travis.
But anyway, yeah, so it does tick all the boxes.
Fantastic.
Not to say one could follow Terry Gilliam to any number of very interesting places alone, being one of the more interesting directors going around today.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Anyway, so I've never seen Time Bandits.
You've never seen Time Bandits?
Somehow it slipped.
Wow.
It's making a TV series based on Time Bandits. How interesting. But no, I've somehow never managed to see it. And being a major fan of Monty Python, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yep. It's a travesty. It is a good opportunity for you to watch. I think we've been like, because neither of us had watched Night of the Generals before, had we?
I hadn't, no.
You hadn't watched Syriana.
I had.
Oh, you had? Oh, okay. Oh, I thought we had gone back a couple of weeks with movies that you'd never watched.
This is 3 in a row now for me, and
yeah.
I mean, like, it's nice to go back and watch. Just like if you could pick a film like Ghostbusters, so we could sit here and jerk off about it for 25 minutes, half an hour without a problem. But that'd be more interesting. I think it's more interesting to have people, hear our first impressions of something, and maybe they have missed as well. Time Bandits isn't a particularly well-known film anymore. It's kind of a cult film, I guess.
Oh, okay. Miss Foxy, that is good. She wrote in the chat, what's wrong with you, Travis, for not having watched this? And then followed that up with, it's a travesty. Pun intended. Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. That is going to be a t-shirt now.
Enjoy the veal. I'll be here all week. Take my wife, please. Thank you. Yes, no one's made that joke before.
No. All right. Well, should we move on?
Let's. We're going to move on to. Should we move on to Falcon?
Let's go on to Falcon and Winter Soldier episodes 1 and 2, ladies and gentlemen. This is the latest offering on Disney Plus from Marvel, following on from the overall success of WandaVision. Very different storytelling devices on play here. This follows on after the snap the snap back. So the world is repopulated with all the people that disappeared during Infinity War and came back at Endgame. I think it's about 6 weeks or something like that.
6 episodes, yeah.
Yeah. I'm talking about timelines. So this is set. It's only a few weeks after the fact, and we are picking up the characters of Falcon. Sam Wilson is his normal name. He was in Captain America: Winter Soldier, as well as the rest of the Avengers movies, and of course the Winter Soldier, Sebastian Stan playing Bucky Barnes. Captain America's long-lost best friend turned super villain for one movie, and then protagonized going forwards.
Kind of a useless Avenger ever after. I think if any Avengers do have to shoot guns has been kind of useless.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're shooting guns at Thanos. What is that going to do? Yeah,
and there's like, so should we do like episode 1 then episode 2, or just our general thoughts for the first 2?
I think let's just give our general impression, because I have a feeling you said last week that you had a feeling that your opinion was the diametric opposite of everybody else's, and you're going to go back and watch it again. Did you have a chance to do that, or?
I did, yes. I have watched episode 1 twice. I've watched episode 2 once. And episode 1, when I first watched it, I was bored shitless. The action sequences were attempts at trying to recreate what they did in Captain America Winter Soldier, like particularly the feel of the tactical strike of a superhero on a location, the ferry where the way that Winter Soldier opens up. But it never reaches those heights. It's never as thrilling because Falcon's kind of a boring character when you take Captain America away from it, or the Winter Soldier, because their scenes in Captain America Civil War, they were cool because they had that good kind of old best friend, new best friend, butting heads, pseudo camaraderie sorts of things, and they played well together, and that's what I wanted more of in this show. And those two didn't share a scene in the first episode, and it just highlighted for me how disinterested I was to each of those individually. So boring, and it's setting up a different kind of storytelling. I said before the series launched that I have a feeling it's going to be a bit more like a Tom Clancy kind of thing, with a bit more going on under the surface, and certainly not the way that WandaVision started off as almost like a bizarrely David Lynchian kind of feel of a superhero thing. This definitely plays up the action, and it's got some of that conspiracy / anti-government kind of rhetoric sprinkled through it. I really didn't like the first episode because I didn't think that they established anything about the world. It just showcased that I didn't care about the two main characters the show is named after when they're on their own. They're kind of like there's a whole sequence where Sam Wilson goes off and he's talking to his sister, and there's a lot of drama and things going on about selling a boat, and what was it like because I was blipped out and you kept on going. It's like, that's actually kind of an interesting idea. How does that affect brother and sister, where ages change and stuff like that? But they didn't really go into it, and it was kind of uninteresting and just annoying. And the same for the Winter Soldier, where there's like elements of him talking with his therapist about kind of righting wrongs, and him trying to reach out but always staying in the shadows for people he wronged as the brainwashed Winter Soldier. Again, really an interesting concept, but they don't really go into it, or they don't present it in an interesting way that makes me genuinely empathize with either of the characters. And it's like, okay, come on, get on with it. This is none of this stuff was really shown in the trailers beforehand. So obviously this isn't what they're hanging their hat on. This is prologue. So when episode 2 launched and came out, so much better, because it actually gets those two characters together, and we start seeing more of them butting heads and just dealing with the fact that there's been a newly named Captain America on the scene, and how they're dealing with that, and how they're trying to deal with being friends in a world where there is no longer the Captain America they both were best friends with for different periods of time. Suddenly the story and the show gets more vitality and life going forwards. So I'm hopeful.
It's an upswing for you.
Huh? Yes.
So it's an upswing for you.
Yes,
I completely and utterly disagree with you. And I actually kind of find it quite remarkable, because you kind of sound like those people who were saying, WandaVision's so boring, nothing happened. Like, this is doing, in many ways, exactly the same thing that WandaVision was doing in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
That it's actually taking, which is quite remarkable. It's got less episodes than WandaVision to work with, but it's still taking it some time to set its scene, to tell us about its characters, to set up its story. I'm glad you didn't jump to the conclusion of going, it's shit one episode in. Well, I mean, you've got Disney Plus anyway. You were probably always going to watch. But like some people might nope out after one episode if I didn't like it. But for me, I had none of those problems that you did. I didn't. The problems I had with it didn't worry me anywhere near as much as it did you. I found the action scenes quite just fine. They were more interesting maybe than some of the action scenes in WandaVision, for example. Like at the end of WandaVision, it's quite dull because it's just Skybeam, pew, pew, pew. lasers, magic lasers, blah blah blah. Don't care, seen it. But this is one of the maybe the more interesting parts of Sam is that he's not really super powered. He's more in the Tony Stark category in the sense he's got the suit, which kind of makes him. And he had to in the action scene. The main action sequence I remember is in the ravine chasing the helicopters. I thought it was a really cool scene. I thought it was really well done for a television show. Goes to show that the line between TV and film for Disney and Marvel isn't really there anymore. It did kind of remind me of Independence Day, though, I must say. Like, it was very Smith Independence Day. But I found that quite an interesting and entertaining opening to the show. And as you say, if you'd ask me who is the least interesting Avenger, I think Sam would be in the conversation. And like I said, Winter Soldier would probably be in there because, look, what did he do in Endgame? He shoots a machine gun at Thanos' soldiers. He's a super soldier like Steve Rogers. Like, why isn't he like beating the shit out of bad guys? But you're right, Dave. And I've found them pretty uninteresting in the Avengers. But then again, some might have said the same thing about Wanda and Vision in the sense that they hadn't really had a whole lot to do in the Avengers films because they were so focused on particularly Iron Man and Captain America. And a few others. They didn't really. There's so many characters on screen; it's hard to give them all screen time to do something cool and interesting. So they kind of had to make do with what they had. It didn't worry me at all that they were not on screen together. And I didn't get any of that cool banter. I actually really enjoyed the scenes with Falcon and his sister, and I think it's because I remember when we had Endgame come out. One of the things I said I would love to see a TV show just about the blip. Like, the blip is an incredible storytelling device that they've got sitting there, and I'm so excited that they're actually using it. They're actually using it. They're not actually just ignoring it like a fucking
consequences.
Idiot. Things like, what about the, like I said, you're like, okay, your husband blips out of existence. 2 years, you mourn for a year and a half. 6 months later, you meet somebody new, you get married, you get pregnant, you have a kid or whatever. All of a sudden, 2 years after that, boom, your husband exists again. And what a fucking awkward situation that would be. Like, are you still married to that dude? Are you married to the second dude? Like, you probably still love the first dude, but you love the second dude. Like the Helen Hunt situation in Castaway. What a fascinating story to tell. And I'm really glad they're not telling that story yet. But they're telling stories about that, right? They're actually using that event for some really interesting storylines. And the idea here that, like, he's been blipped out of existence for 5 years, and the bank manager says to him, "You've got no proof of income for the last 5 years. I can't give you a loan." On the one hand, like, he's a fucking Avenger. Why wouldn't you give him a loan? But there's also that really interesting line. He's like, "Did Stark pay you guys or anything like that?" And he's like, no, it didn't work like that. But probably more of that. I really like. I think it sets up something that we are going to see moving through the series. So it didn't. I wasn't bored at all. I was not as intrigued as I was with WandaVision, but I was interested to see what they were going to do with the story. And I enjoyed it even more during the second episode, where they really started to. I mean, they're quickly tying some of those threads together. We saw some in the first episode into actual storylines in the second one. And I think if WandaVision was about grief and mourning and regret, this show is about race. WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm going to give a lot of credit here to an episode in Hollywood Reporter this week. Falcon and the Winter Soldier uncovers Marvel's original sin. Because God knows I don't know enough about comic book lore to have joined the dots like they did. And all of this comes, I think, largely from the introduction in episode 2 of the super soldier that Isaiah Bradley.
Yes.
Who was an African-American super soldier who the United States government used in Korea, where he met Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, and actually, depending who you ask, defeated him. in the Korea as part of a Korean war. And look, I'm not going to spoil it because I would encourage anybody who's listening or watching or both to check it out on their own, because it is, I think, going to be worth watching. And there's a scene directly after that where they leave Isaiah Bradley's house. Don't want to spoil it again, but you know the scene I'm talking about. They walk out on the street, having a heated discussion, and the thing happens. And that's not there by mistake. That's not accidental.
That is pointed. That is very pointed.
And the way the people involved in that scene address what's going on and who they address it to, I think is the point. So I would, you really going to need to be really keen to go and check out the article. But the Marvel's original Falcon and Winter Soldier uncovers Marvel's original scene in the Hollywood Reporter. If you are interested, or you are watching a show, well worth a read of that article. It kind of puts it all into context. And I think from what we've seen in episode 1 and 2, this is going to set up as race is a major angle in this story.
I am just worried, just given Marvel's overall history of all of their movies and the TV shows to date, even the stuff that's not Disney Plus shows, there's a lot of things where they'll touch on these notions and these ideas, and then 3/4 of the way through, they just give it up to have that big action sequence, that big grand finale, and they forget about nuance. And that's one of the things. Yeah, and I really hope they don't, because if they keep these elements that we're talking about now as poignant keystones for the series, it can inform the action sequences, it can inform the storytelling, it can educate us, and it can just elevate everything up. You don't have to lose those elements to deliver good action. It can be part of the storytelling tool. I just don't know if they're going to do it. Because all evidence to the contrary, frankly, the closest that we've had is maybe Black Panther versus Killmonger and the way that fight ended.
You're right. They don't have a great track record. I mean, look, I am going to park the movies. I think movies have a different expectation to movies aren't long form storytelling. And that's where television or streaming can kind of do. And I feel like certainly WandaVision, while as overall we walked away going thumbs up, that final episode was weak, and probably the weakest episode in the series. And it was a very Marvel ending. It's sky beams, pew, 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 punch, 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 game over, see you later. Even then, though, like they did have some interesting elements in there that they were still able to get away with. I don't know what it is. Is a Kevin Feige directive or something going? There has to be a sky beam and a punch out in the final finale of anything Marvel. It's like
that's Marvel's answer to Marvel.
So people turn up. They turn up with a sky beam and the fight. But I'm with you. I hope they try and whatever they do here, I hope they keep it consistent with the story that they're setting up to tell. I think now the other interesting element in here is the fake Captain Marvel. Captain America. The fake Captain America played by Wyatt Russell here. And he is essentially someone who's been handpicked by, I guess the indication is the US government to basically fill the boots of Steve Rogers and start carrying the shield and, fight for truth, justice, and the American way. Don't use that. That's a copyright. And it sets it up interestingly. We see him for the start in episode 1, and he has an interesting role to play in episode 2. And we've also had the setup of the villains in the 2 episodes. The villains being the Flag Smashers, who I don't know if they're actually in comic book lore or not. Kind of a dumb name, but they are. There you go. They are.
It seemed because we've got the Flag Smashers. We had the last minute tease of the return of Zemo, and there was also a phone conversation about sort of like you stole my property with after the heist with the Flag Smashers, and it seems like there might be a mysterious third party that is connected in some way, shape, or form. So, and then we still haven't had what's her name? Sharon Carter appear in the thing, and there's been a fair bit of news about like she's going to be real badass, she's going to be hardcore, she's the great niece or something of Agent Carter. So there's a lot still to introduce in this show properly and properly establish. It's just interesting that they're going for 6 episodes, like we said before. I wonder if they're gonna try and squeeze too much in. But like I said, the first episode fumbled it for me. Second episode, much, much stronger. And interestingly, like Sam Wilson, where is he? Anthony Mackie. I've tried watching him in a few things that are not him playing a Marvel character. Like, he's okay in The Hurt Locker. He's okay in The Adjustment Bureau. He was also in the 2nd season of Altered Carbon. He's okay, but for some reason, he's never particularly charismatic. But there seems to be some more connective tissue with him and Sam Wilson. He just comes a little bit more alive. It just as an actor portraying a character, there just seems to be more life in him when he plays Sam Wilson. It's unusual.
I would recommend his episode of Black Mirror, but I'm not going to go there. You with me? I'm with you. I don't think much of him as an actor. And interestingly, it is probably, apart from Steve Rogers, any other character in the MCU he seems to have any sort of chemistry with is Bucky Barnes. So it's a kind of a cool idea. They're both fine. They both do what they do. Wyatt Russell is interesting. Yep. Erin Kellyman as Carly Morgenthau, who's a gender-bent version of Flag Smasher, I've just learned. Okay. Flag Smasher in the comic books from 1985 was Carl Morgenthau. So okay. Carly Morgenthau, see they're being diverse. Okay. And Erin Kellyman, instantly you look at her and you're like, you were in Solo. And my goodness, you weren't the worst thing about that film, but you weren't good.
She's going to be in the new Willow as well, new Willow series.
Yeah, she gets around, but I have a feeling this is just me going into prediction territory, which we absolutely never did during WandaVision.
No, never.
I don't think they're going to be quite the bad guys we think they are.
I think that there's going to be a bait and switch. I think my theory of how this is going to be more of like an action espionage kind of thing with that controversial twist. The fact that we had that really quite nice, interesting kind of genuine introduction to the new Captain America, where he's in his old school locker room and he's just talking things through and talking with, I'm guessing it's his wife or girlfriend, and then his unit mate comes in, and it's 2 different sides to his thought process coming through. I think we're going to see some interesting development with him and how his very heavy, I've been in the forces more than I'm that little guy from Brooklyn, I'm never going to forget that route, playing off and seeing whether he falls more on the government side, it becomes a bit more of a weapon, or how that plays into the Flag Smashers. Maybe we're going to end up being a bit more sympathetic towards the Flag Smashers, and this is their way of kind of doing an anti-Captain America. I think there's a lot of potential in this show, and I'm looking forward to episode 3.
I am too. I feel like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. You see the vibe, but there's something funny about the way they're portraying those villains. And I'm not sure that they're quite as bad as we think they might be. So time will tell. And then at the end, the bad guy who everyone thought was going to be WandaVision's going to be in it.
Mephisto.
Mephisto. It'll probably be him at the end. It'll be him at the end.
Zemo was Mephisto all along.
Wouldn't that be interesting if they actually did that? Like the one where no one actually thinks it's Mephisto. Oh, it was me all along.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. I've got to say, I am excited to see Daniel Bruhl come back because I think he's a good actor. I don't think he was given near enough to do when he was in Civil War. So give him a meatier villain role. I think that he could potentially, particularly with the character that Baron Zemo has been in the comics and the way that they kind of updated him for Civil War. I think there's a lot of potential to make him a really intriguing, love to hate him villain in a way, not quite in the same kind of sexy, slightly sleazy way that Loki was, but he could end up being one of those intelligent, charismatic villains that you don't get very often in the MCU. And he's an actor who I think has got the acting chops to really deliver something quite special. So I'm looking forward to seeing what
You'll see where it goes. I think it's up on Saturday morning, Australian time.
Friday night, I think. Late Friday night.
Saturday morning, Australian time, and you can get it on the Disney Plus if you're prepared to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which we endorse. We don't endorse doing illegal things.
No, we do not. But if you are already subscribed to 5 other streaming channels, then I think you're paying enough.
While we are talking, we actually got some Rhubarb Broden says you get some real Homelighter Light vibes from the new Captain America. And I got to say, I think you're on the money there. I can kind of see. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. He's a bit fishy. Something going quite right about him. I think I think you have to imagine the context the show takes place in. I mean, I don't know when they were writing it, but the idea of patriotism probably hasn't really given itself a very good name, especially in the United States over the last few years, especially, I guess, in recent months where that probably didn't influence the show quite so much. But if you look at the Wikipedia entry on Flag Smashers, whereas the red skull symbolizes Nazism, Flag Smasher symbolizes anti-patriotism. And is this a show going to be about patriotism and the dark side of patriotism? Someone like a Homelander, is Homelander actually patriot? I think Homelander is incredibly cynical. But if it would be new Captain America turn out to be like Homelander, you could almost say that's the dark side of patriotism. But I'm with Rhubarb Ronan, who's saying that you're getting that Homelander vibe. I agree, and that's a good call.
Yeah, I think so. And that thought process did actually make me remember a character that has only been name-checked once since his movie debut. And that was Tim Roth's character from The Incredible Hulk, and how he was a dyed-in-the-war soldier, and he got the super soldier serum, and he got really good, but he kind of fucked his brain up somewhat, and he became the abomination. Yeah. And there's one name check. I think it's something like I don't know. I think it's what the fuck is his name? The general General Ross. I think he says, "I'll throw you in a hole with Blonsky," or something like that. I'm kind of wondering if maybe we'll get a reference to that coming in. Maybe we'll see a little bit of the turning to the dark side for him, and they might come back to that old thread a little bit, perhaps.
It would be consistent. Just the actual. Again, to go back to the article I was talking about earlier, the inspiration behind some of the stuff that we've seen in the first 2 episodes was published by Marvel just after 9/11 in the early 2000s and has been out of print for over 10 years. So they are pulling some deep cuts in this show. So it would not be out of the realms of possibility to go a deep cut in the MCU as well. And have referenced someone like Tim Roth's character, who I love Tim Roth. I really like him. Yeah, before we move off superhero territory, have you seen the trailer for the Suicide Squad?
I have.
Not Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad.
The Suicide Squad. James Gunn's Suicide Squad. I have.
Any brief impressions?
Looks like a James Gunn movie with DC characters.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's.
I mean,
fine.
that said, I did give a caveat that the trailer for the original Suicide Squad looked shit hot. It looked badass.
And it had Queen soundtrack, and it was just awesome. And yeah, then the movie was trash.
Very, very bad. So I liked it. I think the highlight of this. I think this could be John Cena's star making role.
He got a lot of credit for. I haven't watched it, but the comedy Cock Blockers, where he's like a worried parent about sort of like, I think it was prom night for his kids and like two other families that he's friends with, and they accidentally get caught up in a text chain where the kids are talking about how they're all going to lose their virginity, and apparently it's quite funny, and he is particularly funny in it. And yeah, what we see of him as what's his fucking character's name?
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker, yeah. He comes across as funny, and his outfit looks dumb and stupid, and it's like, okay, I'm down for this. This looks funny and dumb and enjoyable.
I should note that I noticed on Twitter tonight that James Gunn tweeted that John Cena has been doing all his interviews for the Suicide Squad in the costume for Peacemaker, and James Gunn insists that he has not been asked to do it. I don't know. I guess I really enjoyed his work in his lines in the trailer look funny.
Yes.
So not getting my hopes up because I've been burnt before by this property, but I liked the look of it.
I agree. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and they're saying August 5th is apparently the release date for that one.
We will, in James we trust. Shall we move on while we're talking big Hollywood movies? We seen well, you and I have seen a big Hollywood movie. If you're overseas, envious, we can see big Hollywood movies here currently. Yes. We saw. I don't even remember the name of the film when I went and saw it, but it is Godzilla. It's like, I don't know. It's King Kong versus Godzilla or something.
Godzilla versus Kong.
Kong, yeah, naturally. Just quietly, do you still have the chat bar on the side of your screen? Mine is screwed up.
I do, yes.
Okay, so if I'm not indulging your comments, people, if you're talking about Airplane 2 or some shit, and I don't say anything about it,
I've stopped that.
That is appreciated.
Yeah,
I have mine has crashed, so I can't respond to your comments. So you're relying on that guy over there. So
Me. I don't pay attention too much.
Godzilla versus Kong. Now, this is the
third movie in the
Godzilla verse. Do we count Skull Island in that?
Yes, technically. So it would be the fourth because it is a continuation of that particular screen Kong. So yeah, this is the fourth movie in the kaiju monsterverse movie, as they say. The
synopsis says the epic next chapter in the cinematic monsterverse pits two of the greatest icons in motion picture history against one another, the fearsome Godzilla and the mighty Kong, with humanity caught in the balance. It's directed by Adam Wingard, who actually directed some very decent low-budget horror films back in the day. Stars Alexander Skarsgård, Millie Bobby Brown, Rebecca Hall, who's one of my favorite actresses, Brian Tyree Henry, and Kyle Chandler's in there for a bit, Demian Bashir. Ronnie Chang, the Australian comedian, has one scene. I quite enjoyed seeing that. I should straight away say that I didn't see the second Godzilla film. I kind of forgot there was a second Godzilla film. I saw the first one directed by what's his name, Edwards.
Gareth Edwards, which was Monsters 2.0.
Pretty much, and it starred Wanda and Quicksilver.
Yes,
also known as Elizabeth Olsen, and Aaron Taylor Johnson. Yes. The husband and wife, creepy.
Yeah, same year that they were brother and sister.
And that film was okay.
Yeah.
Kind of light on the Godzilla action.
Yeah.
Someone forgot to tell Gareth Edwards he had a special effects budget this time.
Yep.
Guess there was one in the middle. Was it Godzilla King of Monsters?
So there's Godzilla King of Monsters, Kong Skull Island, and then Godzilla versus Kong.
So I missed the second Godzilla film.
Yes.
I just forgot it happened. I must have missed the memo. I did see Skull Island, and I didn't like it. And that was the fact that I missed the second Godzilla film was a bit of a problem, at least for me early. There are a number of characters in this film who I imagine were established in that film, and relationships and some very loose storylines and plot elements were established in the second Godzilla film. So the idea of Monarch, Millie Bobby Brown's character was established in that film. Kyle Chandler, I guess, his character was established in that film. So instantly, I was like, the people were talking to each other in a way which was like, "This has previously been established. You should know what Monarch is. You should know who Millie Bobby Brown is. You should know who Kyle Chandler is.
Yeah,
we're not going to bother explaining it again." So I was a little bit on the back foot initially with that. So if you are heading into this picture or thinking of going to see it, just be aware of that. Just be aware of it if you haven't seen the previous films. I don't think Kong Skull Island, there was one or two mentions in there like that might have been useful, but really not important. But if you haven't seen the previous two Godzilla films, particularly the second one, you're probably going to be on the back foot like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if you necessarily mean if you want to see it that bad, maybe check out King of Monsters.
No, I think that's very, very fair. But at the same time, even I've watched it, and Godzilla King of Monsters is a guilty pleasure movie for me. It's dumb. It's just big action. It's enjoyable entertainment and a quintessential blockbuster fare. There's no brains behind it whatsoever.
I didn't make a call not to see it. I just forgot it happened.
Yeah, no, but it's even watching it, then coming into Godzilla versus Kong, it kind of feels like you're missing a chunk. And particularly the way that the opening credits are, it kind of plays all this footage, lots of footage of Godzilla fighting other kaiju, which we've had two other movies where he has fought multiple other kaiju. And then it looks like it's kind of building up like a tournament table with a winner proceeding on. And then it comes to Kong, and it just kind of flashes to him just being the contender against Godzilla. And you briefly see these other fights that he's apparently had, and it's like, well, not really, because we saw him fight some of those creatures back in the Vietnam War, and we haven't seen him since. So it feels like you're just missing this big chunk on the other side. And then it's like, okay, you know what? Suspension of disbelief. They're fighting. Fine. Okay. But even then, it's still kind of, did I miss something?
That bothered me. I'm not a massive fan of this kind of film. I think it's fair to say, I think a few times now you've said Star Wars, you're just not interested in anymore. They're not making stories for you anymore. And you're okay with that because they may be targeting a younger audience or a different audience, but you've just recognized it's just not for you anymore, really.
Yeah.
You'll probably watch them out of intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be lining up around the block to see whatever it is new that they come up with eventually. And I think it's fair to say that this film, for films like these, particularly this one, fall into that category for me in the sense that I don't think I've ever really been a big fan of monster movies unless they're really, really awful. If they're really awful and they're so bad they're good, that maybe is a little bit more in my wheelhouse. A film where two giant CGI creations just punch each other in the face for 20 minutes and they call that a finale. Generally speaking, doesn't interest me very much. I liked Pacific Rim a bit. I mean, that's probably Guillermo del Toro's influence there. He does some slightly different things. Movies. Kong Skull Island was just a CGI shitfest. Original Godzilla. Like I said, Gareth Edwards forgot he had a special effects budget, but in the end, it was a CGI shitfest. So people, oh my god, I get to see giant monsters punching each other in the face, and for me, it's a little bit my initial reaction every time. It's like, who the fuck cares? You've seen that before. You've seen that so many times before. How is that? Just because they're different monster skins this time, how is that more interesting than last time? And how is this different to Pacific Rim? Really?
You're poking holes into every Legend of Zelda game. Stop it.
So that's kind of my initial reaction to most of these things. Is like, why should I care? It's not even a guy in a rubber suit anymore. You can't even appreciate the physical performance. But this one was, apart from the initial, a bit like you, I was a bit put off my game a little bit. I was a little bit disoriented by the story because it wasn't giving me much. It was assuming a lot of knowledge, which was a bit surprising. If you're seeing film 20 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, film 20 in Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think you can assume a fair amount of knowledge. You know, maybe not so much. But initially, once I got past that, this is potentially one of the better monster movies I've seen in recent years. I would put it in the category with a film like Pacific Rim as trying to do something a little bit more interesting and recognizing some of the weaknesses that these films suffer from. In a sense, is why should I give a shit about who wins the fight? Don't care. Human characters are generally, you know, two-dimensional, you know, just there, not doing anything. And those two things in particular, and this is a story, you know, it's really just a wait until the final 20 minutes when you get to see the monsters fight, which is what you paid your $15. I think Justin Wingard, Adam Wingard, sorry, and the writers who are Eric Pearson, Max Borenstein, and Zach Shields have come up with something a little bit different here. For starters, some of the human characters are actually genuinely very interesting. Particularly, Millie Bobby Brown is incredibly watchable for me. The story basically goes in two different directions. We have two groups here. We have Alexander Skarsgård, Rebecca Hall, and her daughter who can sign language King Kong. They are taking King Kong to... I won't spoil it. They're doing one thing, and at the same time we have Millie Bobby Brown, Julian Dennison from Deadpool 2, and Brian Tyree Henry doing a second sort of following a second sort of a B story. They're doing their own thing, and they do join together at the end. Where on the one hand, I can very easily see, and some people have said when the B story is on camera, they really lost interest. I guess those are the people who are very interested in CGI monsters. That was not. I can definitely see how that could have been the case, but I found particularly Millie Bobby Brown and to a lesser extent Julian Dennison's characters and their chemistry together on screen so watchable and amusing and interesting that I was like, no, I'm quite happy following these guys. These guys are the most interesting characters in the film. Whereas you're talking cardboard cutouts, Alexander Skarsgård was absolutely one of those.
He's proven that he can actually perform from time to time, and he's kind of wasted here. And it's like, okay, wait, what is his character? He's the author of a book about talking about going into the Hollow Earth, and then when the story needs, he can pilot a really advanced ship.
Yeah, like a helicopter or hovercraft.
Yeah,
anti-gravity thing.
What is this guy? He is Johnny everybody.
It's what the plot needs him to be.
Yeah.
Rebecca Hall, like I said, I think she's actually a very, very fine actress. She's okay, and she's not given a lot of work to do with here. A lot of work to do here that's worth mentioning. But their plot line has the advantage of having the CGI monster fights and the cool explosions. So, you know, that'll keep people happy on that side. But I instantly, by having that second sort of plot line where you had some funny, interesting, entertaining, likable characters, instantly made me far more interested in what the story had to say. I wasn't really interested in what they were doing. I was just interested in watching them and enjoying them. Millie Bobby Brown is a serious talent.
She is going to be a
massive star.
Yeah.
Like, I liked the first season of Stranger Things. I haven't been able to stomach the other seasons anywhere near as much. But really didn't have. She was kind of one note in Stranger Things. So she was good, but she didn't get a lot to do. She just played, was it 11? And she didn't get a lot of range to play within that one. But so it was so fun to see her. This is, I think, the first thing I've seen her in apart from that. To actually get to see some actually play a really goofy, intelligent, funny character. So she can do comedy, she can do action, she can do drama. She's going to be a massive, massive star. If she continues to she seems to want to continue acting. If she wants to continue down this path, I think she'll do exceeding well. And Julian Dennison, look, I think he's going to get stuck playing comic relief characters, but he does it very well.
Yeah, it just comes so naturally to him. There's part of me when I watch him do stuff, I kind of think there's hints of a little bit of Belushi in him, kind of that lovable disaster that you just can't help but kind of root for all the time. Like everything that Belushi did, he was sort of like this wonderful energy, and he was, even though he was kind of a shithead in Deadpool 2, I still kind of wanted to root for him. And
I can see a bit of maybe if you've been talking comedy legends, people like John Candy.
Yeah.
Like, the lovable underdog. And I mean, I hope for better for him for his career. Maybe a bit more of a Jonah Hill path. Where he
a couple of serious roles thrown in. Yeah.
But he was like, so I'm sorry I'm laboring the point, people, but I really enjoyed their arc, and it was far and away the most enjoyable part of the film for me. So he's the Fox. Sorry, our friend Fox Pixar Media is back asking about the Warner Brothers logo. I don't know if it was it. Is this Warner Brothers? I don't think it is. Is it?
It is Warner Brothers. Yes, because this has had a lot of people kind of boycotting it, vetoing it because they want to release the air cut. Release the air cut of Suicide Squad. And it's like, it's probably not going to happen.
Whatever. I guess the other angle I really enjoyed on this was it kind of incorporated another classic story into the iconic characters, and that was a Journey to the Center of the Earth. Which is that a Edgar Rice Burroughs, the Jules Verne?
Yes, Jules Verne.
Yes. A classic Jules Verne story, which we haven't seen on camera since the Brendan Fraser film. But it was basically, it was basically Journey to the Center of the Earth starring King Kong.
Yeah, that's the point. There's that kind of third storyline of over the course of Godzilla, King of Monsters, Kong Skull Island, and this movie. That notion and the establishment and development of the legitimate conspiracy theory that is out there of a hollow Earth. They actually flesh it out in actually an interesting way. And they use that as quite a cool launching point as to explaining the why and everything for these kaiju monsters, which I really appreciate. And hearing you talk about the kind of like plot A and plot B, it made me think one of the reasons why I think I really just enjoy this is because it's kind of what Star Wars did in The Empire Strikes Back, where they split the party and you just had that chance to just kind of jump from highlight to highlight to highlight, and you had just these wonderful, the character development of Han Solo and Leia, the special effects sequences of Luke training, and it's sort of like, okay, there's obviously more lore and kind of artistry, I suppose, in the Star Wars comparatively, but then you've got sort of like the other bits, and you can jump from one to another, and I think that's where this movie succeeds, in that it jumps around from one storyline to another. It never overstays its welcome too long in each one. And kind of when
it's a classic storytelling trope.
Yeah.
I think the best Star Trek movies do the same thing. Let's look at First Contact. What does it do there? We have Picard's story on the Enterprise, and we have Riker's story down on Earth, and they're working towards a similar goal, but from different angles. Or Star Trek 4, or it's not unusual. I mean, I know it's something I've always noticed in the Trek films, that when you split the crew, and tell two different stories at the same time, when it's done well, is when they do their best work. But it's not it's not is there anything new in the world of film? I mean, what do they say? There's 7 actual stories in the world.
Yeah.
So you're right. It really helps you from not getting bored quickly, right? We need to take a break. We just had a massive fight scene between Kong and Godzilla. Let's transition back to something a little bit more low key for a little while.
The other thing that I liked about this movie is it was the first time where we actually really kind of got to see the animalistic pros and cons of each of the characters. Go away, Archimedes, I'm talking. The first time where Kong and Godzilla clash, Kong is stuck on a boat, and Godzilla, this big lizard that has been shown repeatedly, is a very good swimmer. And it's like, yeah, this is like very much one is at a severe handicap, but the way that they utilize the ape-ish element of Kong and him kind of pounding his chest and jumping from one boat to another and things like that, and trying to use weapons, it's not something that we've seen in other kaiju movies, because so often in recent times they've been just complete and utter freaks of nature that we've never seen before, and there's like weird extensions, and there's no familiarity with an animal that everyone has an idea of how they move, how they react in the real world. Seeing just a giant ape being a bit more primitive thought and kind of a bit more strategic, particularly in the final scene where they're fighting in Tokyo, and him using the terrain to try and regain an advantage and using a weapon. Fuck's sake. What?
We're now welcoming our third host tonight, that is Archimedes.
Jesus.
Archimedes has opinions.
Yes, apparently. I need to talk about Kong. It
was a great scene to see, Kong have to fight at this distinct disadvantage of not being able to swim and have to fight an amphibious creature in Godzilla.
Yeah.
I think this film fails for me on the Dell test. My friend Dell, who, if anything fails to meet, actually fails the laws of physics, he's out. So if he saw gravity and they fly the space shuttle from the American space station to the Chinese space, space shuttle can't do that. So I'm out. There are a few of those where Godzilla somehow managed to swim from Antarctica to Hong Kong in about 10 minutes.
Hollow Earth.
They didn't mention that. They wouldn't have explained it.
They explain it in Godzilla King of Monsters. So
it's in the comic books. If you hadn't read if you watched the cartoon and read the comic books backwards and held them up to the light on a Thursday, there's also a thing where Millie Bobby Brown and her crew traveled to Hong Kong via some sort of underground railway thing,
a hyper train,
something hyperloop kind of thing, and it travels at like 600-700 kilometers an hour, and it's designed for freight, not passengers.
No, they would have been
eviscerated.
Yes.
That kind of slows down. If you slow down from 600 kilometers an hour, we have a fourth host, I think, now. I think our fourth host might have joined us.
No, he, in typical cat fashion, is, I want to come in, open the door. I don't know.
The Brexit of cats. They're going to keep scratching at the door until we can go outside. And then we don't want to leave.
What a better deal.
So, if you were in a Hyperloop vehicle that was not designed for passengers with no seatbelts, the idea there was such a thing as inertia. I'm not a scientist, but that's a thing, right? It was very amusing that they just sort of thought, well, no one's going to pay attention to that, and they probably won't, except for freaks like me, who also sat there thinking, my goodness, a lot of people died in this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like all those people on the boats that Godzilla takes out, there are thousands of people on those boats, and he just blows the helm back.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another 3,000 people. And then, of course, in the classic big fight scene between the two of them, which take place in a Southeast Asian city, I'm going to say, spoiler it, I don't think I'm spoiling a lot here, is Hong Kong. Wasn't it very interesting that it was Hong Kong and not Tokyo? Wonder where the money for the film came from.
Now, as a side note, that the whole sequence in Hong Kong and the fact that there's a shot of sort of like buildings falling down, it's in the trailer, buildings falling down and people panicking and running, and they go into kaiju shelters. It's like, are they trying to gear up to bring this into Pacific Rim kind of thing as well? Because that is part and parcel of Pacific Rim, that kind of like kaiju shelter, the way that, and spoilers, I guess, even though it's kind of out there for the twist villain, 3, 2, 1, Mechagodzilla is like, okay, it's being piloted, or they attempt to get it piloted.
That was very, very much like Pacific Rim, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at that and going, okay, are they gonna, if and when they do another one of these MonsterVerse movies, are they gonna go, all right, one brain isn't enough, we need 2, and suddenly you've got the pilot system from Pacific Rim? It's like, okay, that could be kind of cool, long form. Here's how you weave in a totally different universe slowly into one that's making a little bit more money for us.
Was Pacific Rim owned by Warner as well?
Pacific Rim was Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures, which also did this. So yeah,
you could tie them into the same universe.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised, because I definitely got a vibe from this that this is a shared universe kind of. I mean, everybody wants a shared universe now. We've got DC have sort of got theirs, and MCU obviously. Universal tried very hard with their Dark Universe thing with the Mummy, and they'd set it up all with future movies, and I think that's dead now. It's
been reimagined under the Blumhouse banner because of the success of The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss, which was fantastic.
Look, I'm not opposed to them. I liked the idea when Marvel came up with it, and I like the idea now. So I'm not opposed to that. That would be an interesting angle for
when it's done well.
If it's done well, and it's rarely done well.
Yeah.
We have a request from Miss Foxy B to get some Archimedes action.
There he is.
There he is. There's the big man himself.
I forgot. There you go.
Currently lamenting the success of the
the
Dark Universe. There is a cat as well, Miss Foxy V, but Charles decided...
The cat is outside.
Charles did not want to make an appearance this evening. He's gone back to his trailer.
Our budget, we can't afford to actually put him on screen. We can talk about him 3 more times, I think.
Then we have to pay him.
Yeah, then we have to pay him.
Then he gets residuals, and it's a big thing.
Oh,
and
God,
lawyers,
the paperwork, the legislation.
Children on set. It's just it's a whole Twilight
They
Zone.
say never work with children and animals.
But here we are. I know it is rude, Foxy. It is like Charles should be working for scale, considering all we've done for him in his career.
Yeah.
So I surprisingly enjoyed it. I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it enough. Like, I was never really very engaged in the film. I didn't really care. I think you're supposed to care about Kong. He certainly is portrayed as the more sympathetic of the 2 monsters.
Yes.
I suspect someone else will get a lot more out of that than me. Considering, like I said, I'm being really upfront here. And this is not the kind of film I would normally enjoy, and not the kind of film I would normally pay to see. But it's done pretty well. Pretty well. I reckon if you like monster movies, if you like any of it, if you like Kong Skull Island, you like the Godzilla films, if you really like the Pacific Rim films, this is definitely one you should put on your list. You'll enjoy it, I think.
Yeah, and it seems like every time they come out with one of these MonsterVerse movies, they get a little bit more ballsy, and you're slowly but surely losing those typical, like, mid-2000s, early 2010s, where there'd be this big monster and we're just it would be always in darkness or in heavy rain because they weren't entirely confident on how it looked when you shone a light on it. So many of the fight sequences are in daylight fighting. They've got weather effects going around them. They're underwater, they're wrestling, and then they're in brightly lit cities at night and things like that. And they look cool, and they're utilizing them. And there's that slight element of like a cartoony nature to them, but it's never too distracting. It's not photorealistic. You're not getting into the uncanny valley either. It's like, okay, every time they're getting a little bit more confident on how to actually show off the monsters.
Miss Foxy B, why did I go then if I don't normally pay to see these films? I went because I care about my audience. I care about you. I watch them so you don't have to.
You hear that, all the other audience members? He's got favoritism for Miss Foxy. It's not fair.
All
not
our
fair
audience. I treat everybody equally. It's. I think this show is more fun when George and I have seen the same thing and we can actually compare notes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would get George talking about what he thinks about Godzilla versus Kong for 10, 15 minutes. And I might ask
this documentary.
And if I haven't actually seen it, then I can't really contribute to the conversation. I'd be sitting here thinking I'm not going to see it because I don't like monster movies. So it's what a good film reviewer does. Normally, we'd be getting these tickets for free. And if anybody watching would like to give us money tickets for free, we will take them. We are for sale.
Yes, we have never shied away from being for sale.
So that's why I went. I went to it would be something. It was something we agreed we were going to. We were going to compare notes on this weekend, and I feel like it provides a bit of yin and yang here because this is definitely, obviously, the kind of film that George normally would enjoy, being a monster movie fan. Whereas me, I'm not really a big fan of this kind of films. So, people all our bots all around the world and in Hollow Earth, who choose
the whole new market for us.
They get to hear both sides of a coin from different types of people who enjoy different kinds of films.
As a side question here, you said you don't really like monster movies. What about kind of things like The Babadook and those more kind of humanized creature features?
I would consider them psychological horror. I mean, The Babadook wasn't really a monster movie. It was a film about grief.
Yeah, fucking amazing.
Fucking great. But I would say a monster movie I did like, which nobody else liked, was a film called Colossal.
So good. So good.
A lot of people kind of went into that expecting it's one of those films where they go in expecting one thing, and then a director who's got the cool name of Nacho Vigalondo.
Yes.
Nacho. He bait and switched them. He thought they were getting a monster movie. But they kind of did, but they got something very, very, very different. And it's a wonderful movie. It's my favorite Anne Hathaway role. And I don't like Anne Hathaway because I think she plays the same character every time.
And Jason Sudeikis does really well.
Jason Sudeikis plays so much against type in that film. So if you're talking about monster films, I actually enjoyed Colossal would be one of them because it's not about the monsters; it's about the people. And that's my disconnect from these kind of films is why should I care about a giant CGI monster? It doesn't really exist. And you really need to work to give me a reason to care about a CGI character. And it can be done. It has been done, but it's rarely in a film like Kong. You're not going to waste a lot of time. Kong versus Godzilla. Don't waste a lot of time on getting me to care about the characters because 99% of people turning up to watch it, they want to see the punch up, right?
I mean, especially when you think about the other recent, say in quotation marks, Kong that we got, which was Peter Jackson's King Kong, and he invested a lot of time in essentially making King Kong the main character and trying to tell the story kind of from his perspective. He was the most humanized Kong we've seen in a very long time, and a lot of people kind of felt creeped out by it. In the end, it's like, I
liked that film. I liked that film a lot.
Me too. I thought it was a really, really nice alternative take on just the depiction of the character of Kong. But the mass audience were just kind of going,
Interesting. Kyle Chandler was in that as well. Different film, but not the same version of King Kong, I think. Um, anyway, so that's. I mean, I like monster movie. I like horror films. But generally, again, like if you had a horror film, it's just about the actual monster. That's not very interesting. I would say a film like I know a lot of people hated it, but Midsummer, or what was the one with Tony Collette, Hereditary.
Oh yes.
Well, again, a lot of people hated that. I really enjoyed Colossus, not a horror film, but that's a very different kind of. But again, I think the connection between those films is it's the human characters that are the most interesting part of those stories. The monster is just the what do you call it? Almost the thing that drives the story along.
Yeah, so realistically, what we need is them to do what the MCU have done with superhero movies, but they've just dressed them up as other things. So the next movie is Godzilla and Kong road trip movie, buddy cop road trip movie.
But I think road trip, but like a college road trip, sort of a Porky's film starring kaijus.
You just want every movie to be some variation of Porky's. Porky's in
Porky's
space.
makes everything better. It makes everything better. I think that sums up King Kong. Kong. I think once we get to the Porky segment of the show,
yes,
it's time to move on.
I kind of feel like we want to somehow get Porky's as a chain movie at some point.
I think so. I actually want to put that on my list for the throwback because that's a film you couldn't make today. You could not. Can I talk quickly about Flight of Dragons?
You can talk about Flight of Dragons.
This is going to be brief for people who are watching or listening and you're thinking, my God, this is getting long. I promise it to one of our listeners who I'm not sure is listening this week or watching this week. Maybe we'll watch later. Maybe we'll never watch again. But I said I'd do it, and I did it. So if you're listening as a podcast version and you think, what should I watch? If you tune in and watch and pop a comment in the chat saying, hey, why don't you talk about blah? We might just do it.
Yeah.
You pop it on the Facebook group. We might just do it. So if you're listening at home and you don't, if 7:30 Australian time works out to 1 a.m. next Thursday, wherever you live, you can pop it on the Facebook page, get in touch with us one of the ways George talked about at the start of the podcast. We may well just watch your suggestion and give you our thoughts on it. And you know what? Like, it can be punishment, right? Like, it could be a punishing kind of thing. And let me tell you, Flight of the Dragons, this was not easy going.
It's hard animation to watch, isn't it?
But Flight of Dragons, not Flight of the Dragons. I got to get the title right. It's weird, actually, because I can see the appeal at the same time as really not enjoying it.
It's so dated. It's really, really hard to just watch, isn't it? Just the way that characters are animated and the way that the story is told. It's sort of like, oh, okay, this is a lot of lore that they're giving me, and I don't know how it all ties together. And this is an ugly movie to watch.
It's well, you're right. It certainly it's a very dated style of animation, and in a way that appealed to me because it was kind of nostalgic. It kind of reminded me of the kind of animations I used to watch when I was a kid, and on TV. There was a cartoon that my dad bought me a VHS copy of called Captain Future. Maybe slightly better animation instead of Japanese animation as opposed to whatever the fuck this is. So, Flight of Dragons, a young Boston writer goes back in time into an era where wizards and dragon reign and science is just barely known. The voice cast includes people like James L. Jones, John Ritter, Harry Morgan, who you're probably going to know as the Colonel, I think, in MASH. He was in MASH anyway.
Yeah.
And I never watched MASH. So Colonel Sherman Potter, Colonel Potter in MASH, and Larry Storch from F Troop, and maybe some other people he will know. So it's an interesting story, and the funny thing is, I could see myself if I'd encountered this as a young kid. I think I would have really, really liked this. I think this would have really appealed to me because it's kind of that mashup of science versus fantasy in sort of a 1982 kind of way. In the sense that our protagonist, who is Peter, I think,
yes.
And he is basically a scientist who plays Dungeons and Dragons. So you watch out. You play playing Dungeons and Dragons, you can be transported back in time. I saw it in the movies.
It can happen.
It can happen. And he somehow gets transported back to this dragon age to help fight evil things. I'm sorry, I wasn't really paying attention. It was difficult. And his superpower, aside from being turned into a dragon at certain points in the story, is his knowledge of science. And the fact that he uses his intelligence on a number of occasions to actually get them out of certain situations and sort of move the plot forward. Which is an interesting little angle, right? It's like basically telling people being smart is kind of a valuable skill. Yeah. Your brain can actually help you. Being a smart guy, you can actually, apart from getting you beat up at school, he's actually going to, in case you ever get sucked back in time, you're going to be set, bro. But it actually is selling the benefits of the virtue of being a smart guy and having some knowledge and understanding how your world works. Obviously in a very fantastic setting with dragons and shit in it. I think that would have really appealed to me when I was about 10. Not so much at 32. Did I get that one through? Yes, that'll do.
My silence is judging you.
So it was one of the things that bothered me watching it now was obviously it's obviously targeted at children, so that side of things made it hard to watch. I don't have a nostalgia connection to it. I think it was Caro Kitty who was our user last week who asked for it. Who they seemed to think it was one of their they said it was one of their favorite videos or shows when they were a kid. That maybe they've got a real strong nostalgic connection to it. And if I had that nostalgic connection to it, maybe that would have made it a more interesting watch for me. But I guess the thing that actually really hurt it for me was the animation, the way the characters were actually drawn. One of the things you can learn by reading the trivia of this, and I probably shouldn't have read it before I watched it, because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, is that the broadcast of a film in Israel in the early 90s was disrupted and discontinued. It was later announced that it was due to a complaint received by the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, its government national broadcaster, that some of the characters resemble anti-Semitic imagery. It hasn't been broadcast on the Israeli national broadcast since. And we talked a bit about this last week. I'm reasonably familiar with the history of the Third Reich because I have a degree in history, and that's completely worthless. And
reason never look under the floorboards.
You can all point and laugh now. And so I'm reasonably familiar with what that's talking about. And once I actually read that, I'm like, oh dear. They really are. They really, really are. They really do look like the kind of things you would have seen published in a very anti-Semitic Nazi newspaper in the 1930s or 40s. Or even today, if you happen to venture into some of the unseemly corners of the internet, and you're like, oh, this is really hard to watch now because the main character, one of the main characters, Arag, I think he's the Green Wizard.
Arag, yes.
He has a very large nose, and not like don't think Dr. Elephant in Astro Boy, but a long, crooked nose. And again, that's a very, very common depiction in anti-Semitic literature of Jewish people. And you're like, that made me very uncomfortable. And people watch the show be like, hey, you're always on about, you people are think I'm some kind of fucking anti-woke person, but I'm like, that has very strong historical connotations. Yes. And there's another scene where they were fighting off a bunch of, I don't know what, there were some sort of creatures. They kind of looked a little bit like rats.
Oh, yes.
And again, they had the same kind of, nose, sort of their face structure again was very reminiscent of the kind of things we're talking about. there of anti-Semitic depictions of Jewish people, and I was like, it made it difficult to watch. I wonder if I might have thought of it if I hadn't had that pointed out to me beforehand, and now I put it in your brain, dear listener. So don't at me.
You just ruined it for everyone.
I have to imagine it was accidental. Yeah. I don't know where this was actually animated. Like, I know a lot of animation work was offshored back in the day to other countries in Southeast Asia in particular. I think The Simpsons was originally animated in South Korea, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of Japanese names in the art department, and that kind of the animation department is all Japanese names. Mm-hmm. So that might give it a slight out in the sense that Japan is not a country with a grand tradition of anti-Semitism, and they may not have been familiar with what their drawings look like. But it made it hard to watch. You know, like even if you see something that's in there that's not even intentional, right? Completely unintentional, but you know, it's like when you go to Japan, and you'll go to Japan one day, and you wander around Tokyo, and there are buildings with swastikas on the sign at the front, like or on like lanterns at the front of it, a whole bunch of swastikas on lanterns, and you're like, I know what that means here, but it still makes it a little bit hard to look at.
Yeah. It's the reappropriation of symbology. It's fascinating how it has changed things.
And so it just pops in, you can't not think it because we've just had it hard coded into us. And obviously, I am not saying you shouldn't use that symbol in Japan. It means something completely different, and it's a different culture, and yada yada yada. I'm just saying that maybe they don't necessarily make the same connection to it that we do.
Yeah.
But anyway, that made it hard to watch. On top of the fact it was already hard to watch, as you said, it was dated, it's aimed at children. But I made it probably an hour, 20 minutes into it before I said, I think I've had enough. So
that's fair.
But I did it, peoples. So
well done.
If you want to be part of it, if you want your favorite thing put through the ringer,
yes,
that is the armchair producers, get on board.
Yeah, I am just going to quickly talk about Netflix new show, The Irregulars. I've only watched one episode, so I'll be very quick. And this is a show that is absolutely 100% designed in the same vein as like target audience, age group, and demographic as Doctor Who, modern Doctor Who, because it feels very much like that kind of production where everything's pretty good, nothing's too real. For a bit of context, this is set in Victorian London. The series follows a gang of troubled street teens who are manipulated into solving crimes for the sinister Dr. Watson and his mysterious business partner, the elusive Sherlock Holmes. And
is Sherlock Holmes like out of copyright now? Is that why this is happening?
Probably. Yeah, I think it's been over a century. So yeah, unless the estate of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is just kind of going, yeah, go at it. I'm just taking money. But it's got some fairly talented young actors in it, particularly the main kind of lead actor, I guess, certainly as it seems from the first episode, character of B, played by Thadia Graham, who I don't really know her from anything. She was in a BBC production called Us last year. She was in The Letter for the King, which is another Netflix show. I don't really know, but she's like charismatic, quite interesting. I like the fact that it actually embracing something that you didn't get to see very often in a lot of Victorian era productions, where there's a lot of diversity. Like the character of Dr. Watson is played by his name is Royce Pearson. He plays one of the mages in Netflix The Witcher. He is an interesting actor. He's a black guy, so I think maybe the first interpretation of Dr. Watson as a black guy. There's Thadia Graham, Asian, but she's speaking with a classic English London accent, and it's kind of not the typical Asian character that you got in the Arthur Conan Doyle things, where it was they would always be sort of like the people that would run the opium houses and opium dens where Sherlock Holmes would go, and they were always depicted in very, very stereotypical Asian gowns and things like that. Whereas this is just a young child who was obviously adopted by someone. The mother has since passed on, so she's been brought up English, for lack of a better descriptor. She just so happens to be Asian. And it's really nice to have all these varieties going on, because that's what Victoria London was. It was a molding pot of everything. It was fantastic. So it's nice to see that coming through in these younger actors. They're delving a bit more into the supernatural. Certainly the first episode, it's got what's his name? Rory McGann, the guy who played the Hound from Game of Thrones. For people who know, he's been in tons of things. You'll look at him, he's got, oh, that guy. He's the main bad guy, and the reasoning behind what he does, it's not bad. It's fairly sympathetic, but it's everything about it kind of feels a little on the cheap side. There's a little bit like the sort of like reimagined Doctor Who stuff, where it's like, okay, you've clearly not got quite much of a budget. You're using CGI, but it's still a little bit shitty. And the story is a little bit held together by staples. But
it's the problem with a lot of Netflix shows that kind of have eyes bigger than their stomach. They're kind of like, I want to tell this grand story, but my budget doesn't. A beer, what are they, sort of a beer lifestyle on a champagne budget, or champagne lifestyle on a beer budget.
Yeah, that's exactly the feel that this is kind of exuding. And I don't know if I'm going to go back for any more episodes, because they're long episodes. The first episode, it's typically it doesn't have the runtime for me. That's just annoying. But I think it's like an hour, and it's a long hour. And I get, like, at least with Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 1, they were doing a lot of world building, whereas this one, they're throwing a lot of stuff at you, and all of it feels half baked. And whereas with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you've got at least a little bit of knowledge going into it. If you've followed any of the MCU stuff, you've got a bit of a base already. This is trying to do a little bit of a twist on the Sherlock Holmes thing. Fortunately,
which has been done and done, and then done some more, and then it did a bit after that. Like, it's done.
Yeah, we've had.
If it's out of copyright, I guess that kind of makes sense, because it's a well-known brand.
Yeah, absolutely. This is now. I think Sherlock Holmes is kind of falling into the same kind of bucket as like like the Tarzan and things, where they kind of go, oh, there's some really cool things on it. Let's just reimagine that. And it has been reimagined so many times. Like, we got the Benedict Cumberbatch modern day, more realistic kind of things. We got the Guy Ritchie stuff. We got
Enola Holmes,
which is actually not bad. It's not totally based on Arthur Conan Doyle. It's a kind of spin-off story and Millie Bobby Brown is just incredibly charming in it.
It's dumb. Like, I remember writing a story with a friend of mine who wanted to make a female gangster film back about 15 years ago. Yeah. And she called it Ali Capone. I mean...
Oh, no. Yeah.
Like, Enola Holmes, like, I mean, it might be good, but that name basically just tacks it onto that Sherlock Holmes bandwagon.
Backwards. But
I'm kind of sick of seeing it, frankly. I'm kind of over it. And I
Yeah.
like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I do too. I think that when done well, it's really good. And I really like the concept of going into what the life of Sherlock Holmes irregulars was like. They were the people living on the streets, and it's like, okay, you could have some really fucking cool story here, but it kind of feels teenage angsty. It's not. I don't think it really quite entirely knows what audience is actually they've like I said at the start, it feels like it's aiming for the Doctor Who style audience, where it's adults who grew up with Doctor Who, and they're now introducing their kids to it. It feels like that, but it's like, okay, no adults have grown up with, oh, that's my favorite irregular or anything like that. There's no point of reference other than John Watson and this aloof Sherlock Holmes. And it's like, okay, I don't think it's going to work. So it feels like it's hedging its bets. It's like, we still might be able to just age it down to be a younger thing and more of a supernatural kind of style, or maybe we could go more serious if the adult audience is the ones that really gravitate to this. And it's like, you're probably going to end up losing both of them by going that route.
You gotta go one way or the other, right? You can't sort of commit. You gotta commit one way or other. Interestingly, Arthur Conan Doyle's estate is suing Netflix over Enola Holmes for some reason, despite the fact that Sherlock Holmes is now public domain. So
interesting.
Interesting stuff. If the law had actually not been amended, Mickey Mouse would be public domain now. Wouldn't that be interesting? Wouldn't that be interesting? See Mickey Mouse popping up on Netflix in a gritty adult drama.
But that's the thing, okay? Mickey Mouse is the icon of Disney. Don't really see him. He's not really in anything. He's just a logo now, really.
Pretty much. He tells you what floor you're stopping at Disney Tokyo Disney.
Oh, he's a bellhop.
An important job. He speaks Japanese, so he's doing well.
Well, on that note, I think that just over 2 hours. We've had a long one this time.
If you stuck with us all that time, I say respect.
Yes, respect. You win yourself. Buy yourself a beer. Well done.
Apologies if I haven't addressed your comment in the last half of the show. As I said, the chat.
Yeah, crashed. The chat's been delayed for some reason. So
I think it's playing nicely. So I haven't been ignoring chat people deliberately. I just can't see the chat.
Hey,
so
here.
Ooh, it's like the Brady Bunch. Thank you for listening.
Go. Yeah, see, this way they actually pop up. Huh.
Do that next week. Yeah, look at us getting organised. We've only been doing Restream for a year now. Let's say thank you anyone who tuned in on the live stream. Thank you for watching. If you're on Twitch, or on YouTube, or on the Facebooks, if you're asking questions about Airplane 2 posters, we appreciate the interaction. Thanks, Miss Foxy B, for your questions to see Archimedes. I think I'm speaking for Archimedes here. I think he appreciates it. Look at that. That's a face that says appreciation. That's an appreciative dog right there. I don't think Huskies are capable of appreciation, though. He's a willful animal.
He's also a big daddy's boy.
Thank you to my glamorous co-host,
Archimedes. Yes,
and George.
Oh, goodness me. Stop that. But yes, thank you. If you are interested, you can download this podcast on all good podcast services. You can catch us. You can watch us at a later date. YouTube.com/armchairproducers. Usually goes up, I think, 24 hours after we've gone live. So usually Thursday evening, you should be able to watch it whenever you like. It will also be on twitch.tv/thefriedbrain, where you can rewatch whenever you like. You can also leave comments on twitch.tv/thefriedbrain chat, and it'll update me later on. Foxy B has been doing that, and I've been trying to keep up to date as well. And of course, both of us are on Facebook, facebook.com/Fried Brain Productions for me. And Travis, he has got his at facebook.com/Travis Croft.
Or Evil Trap on the
Evil
Twitters.
Trap. Yes.
On the Twitters, I'm currently blowing up on the Twitters. So thank you again, everyone, for watching and your interaction. Send us in your suggestions if it's something you want us to run through the shredder. Otherwise, thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
Good night.